Good morning, everyone. I'm enjoying the early morning, beautiful sunshine outside view. I hope you are all having a great morning today as well. I wanted to share something today that over the last few weeks, have been practicing as part of my happiness experiment that actually really shifted a very big part of my perspective. And I actually got the insight from a podcast that I will link in the description. It was very interesting. And it was a podcast about, well, it talked about many things, but the one thing that I kept from it was how the woman said that we either live for autonomy, which means that we live for our own independence, for our own happiness in terms of like what we want to get from our day, from our life. So we live for autonomy, or we live for connection. And when we live for connection, our intention or our focus point is to be in connection with the world around us, with people, with our relationships, with our friendships, our partners. And it was a bit of a reality check for me because I realized that I really had been living for autonomy. Made plans based on what I wanted to do or what would feel good for me. I think that had to do with, when you're coming out of a period of struggling with your mental health, even though this was already a long time ago, you do start to create little habits or routines that you can get very attached to because you think that's what makes you feel good. When it did at some point, like me going on my meditations every morning, or my exercise routine, or planning a lot of time to read or to listen to podcasts or whatever, it did help me a lot, and it did make me feel very good and very happy. And I'm not saying that I'm going to quit all these things, but what I would notice was that sometimes I would prioritize those things so much because it's what I thought I needed, that I wouldn't really prioritize my relationships enough, or really, like if I would make my schedule, I'd always think about what feels good for me, instead of how can I make sure that I'm connected to the people in my life this week. And it wasn't until I listened to this podcast and I realized how much happiness we get from connection, and how I've seemed to just sometimes forgotten about that in a way, that I started to reshift my focus and say, what would happen if I prioritize connection over autonomy? Which doesn't mean that you completely sacrifice anything that you like or want to do. It just means that you give it a equal place next to connection, or at least you just slightly prioritize connection over autonomy. So what does this concretely look like? It looks like, for example, if my partner comes home from his work, instead of me being in my own zone, doing my own thing, I prioritize giving him a hug, going to him, and really taking a moment to connect before I go back to my own thing. It means that if some of my friends ask me to hang out and I'd planned to do something for myself that day, like, I don't know, read a new book or go on a long run or whatever, that I really, really think about it twice and say, no, I'm going to prioritize connection. It means that I maybe take more initiative to call people, or to sit down with people, or to schedule in meetings with friends or dates with my girlfriends, And I've noticed that there's an initial reservation whenever I do that, because I'm so used to being on my own and so used to doing things alone, because that's what always has been my comfort zone. But now that I'm shifting, once I do sit down with people, once I do hang out, once I do prioritize really connecting with my partner, everything seems to kind of feel a lot lighter, feel a lot like more, just not as heavy anymore, or a lot more cheerful and joyful. And it's just one of those reminders that I've gotten tons of times in my life, that people really, really are what makes you happy. Connecting with people is such an important part of really being happy, not just being content or okay, but actually thriving. And to prove that, I want you to think about this. If you think about 3 moments that you remember from the last few years where you were truly, truly happy, like actually happy, the chances are quite large, if you pause this video and just think about it for a second, the chances are quite large that these are moments that you experienced with people, with your family, with friends, with people that you're close to, with work colleagues, when you were doing a really cool project together. Very rarely do we feel the happiest moments in our life, like really, really, truly happy when we're alone. I have 1 or 2 memories of being alone where I felt so, so happy, but it was because I felt so incredibly connected to myself and to life around me in that moment. So it was still about connection ultimately, but all the other moments, if I think about moments that I was so, so, so happy, were moments where I was in connection to people, where I was thriving with friends or doing something with I don't know, people working on something together. And we in our society today seem to have forgotten how important connection is and how necessary connection is. People are having less and less kids because they're choosing autonomy over connection. People are spending less and less time with their friends because, again, they're choosing autonomy over connection. We are not visiting our family as much because we choose autonomy over connection. And I think, when we look at short-term comfort or pleasure, sometimes it does feel like making an effort, or it does feel like, an extra thing on your to-do list to have to spend more time with people or be more intentional with the connections you have. But I think on the longer term, or like in the general zooming out of life, I think that's probably one of the reasons why in the West we are more and more unhappy, because we forget how important connection is. So, as part of my happiness experiment on this channel, I've been really trying to challenge myself to prioritize connection more. Both in my work when I'm with clients, to really, really, like, I already feel very important about this, like to really be connected with my clients, but I've been honing in even more to truly, truly be there for the person when I meet up with someone, like my friends, really, really setting an intention to be connected to that person, to be present with that person, to listen to that person. To really be there for my partner instead of kind of taking them for granted. And it's little things like that that I've noticed have been making me feel more excited and more wholesome and more like just a feeling of warmth in my heart. So something I wanted to share today with you guys, and hopefully something that maybe you can test out for yourself as well. So thank you so much for being here today on this shorter but as important video. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you guys in the next video. Sending you a big hug for connection. Bye.